Bienvenidos a la lección de gramática 12.3, el presente del subjuntivo, or in English, the present subjunctive. So far, everything that you've learned in Spanish class has been in something that's called the indicative mood. And we haven't exactly referred to it as the indicative mood, but now that you're learning the subjunctive mood, it's important to understand that these are a little bit different than tenses. These are two huge classifications that can include several different kinds of tenses. This indicative mood, which we've been using, includes like your regular present tense conjugations. It also includes preterite, imperfect, the present progressive, and some of the other things that we've been working on. To kind of put this into perspective, let's discuss the difference between the indicative mood, which is what we've been using, and the subjunctive mood, which is what we're going to move into next. When you're speaking in the indicative mood, you're stating facts, you're expressing actions or states that are real and definite, and there is complete certainty in what it is that you're saying. So you know that what you're saying is true, and it just really is the way that it is. When you're using the subjunctive mood, however, you're stating your attitudes or opinions. You're stating or talking about uncertain or hypothetical situations. You're wishing or willing something to be a certain way. You're also using the subjunctive mood when you're recommending or trying to influence someone or something to do a certain thing. When you're conjugating in the present subjunctive mood, or present subjunctive is a tense. There are several different tenses within the subjunctive mood. But here's the rule you're going to use. You drop the O from the yo form and add the opposite ending. This should sound familiar to you because we just did this when we learned about the negative to commands as well as the affirmative and negative usted and ustedes commands. That was kind of your first exposure to the subjunctive mood. As you were giving commands to people to do different things, you were actually using the subjunctive mood without realizing it. When I say add the opposite ending, here's what I'm referring to. For AR verbs, your opposite endings would be in the yo form, a. In the to form, your opposite ending would be es. In the el, ella, usted form, your ending is a. In the nosotros form, your opposite ending would be hemos. In the vosotros form, your opposite ending is es. And in the ellos, ellas, ustedes form, your opposite ending is en. Now your opposite endings for the ER and IR verbs, as you might have guessed, in the yo form, your opposite ending is a. The to form, your ending would be as. In the el, ella, usted form, your opposite ending would be a. In the nosotros form, you're going to use amos. In the vosotros form, you'll use ais. And then in the ellos, ellas, ustedes form, you would use an. Again, this should look familiar as some of these endings are similar to what you used with your commands. Let's look at some examples of regular pattern verbs that are conjugated in the present subjunctive. Here's an example of an AR verb, hablar, an ER verb, comer, and an IR verb, escribir. Again, you'll notice they look similar to the commands that you were giving in our last unit. Verbs with irregular yo forms will still do the same thing. You'll still drop the O from that yo form and add the opposite ending. So if you look at all of these verbs, most of them are coming from the go verb list or the ZCO verb list. And then you also have ver, which in the present form is veo. So if you take a look at these examples, you'll notice in the present subjunctive column, which is on the far right, that the example that's shown for you could be used for the yo form, but it could also be used for the he, she, or the formal you. Now, by now you're familiar with those car, gar, zar verbs and how they oftentimes have an interesting spelling change that's a little bit different than your regular pattern verbs. With the present subjunctive, you're going to use that same spelling change that you used in the yo form preterite tense and the same spelling change that you used when you were forming negative to commands as well as usted and ustedes commands. So this should be no surprise to you that in a car or a CAR verb, you would change the C to a QU before adding the E. In a GAR verb, you will change the G to a GU before adding the E. And in a ZAR verb, you're going to change the change the Z to a C before adding the E or before changing the ending to an E. Stem changing verbs in the present subjunctive, if it is an AR or ER verb, it's going to function similarly to the present tense in the indicative mood that you're used to. So basically what that means is you'll stem change in all forms except for nosotros and vosotros. As we call these the boot verbs, that nosotros and vosotros, those conjugations are outside of the boot and therefore don't stem change. Now this is in AR and ER verbs, okay? However, IR verbs function a little bit different. Where you're used to IR, or you're used to stem changing verbs not changing in the nosotros and vosotros forms, the IR verbs do change in the present subjunctive. Now the change that's a little bit different is that your E will change to an I and the O will change to a U. Take a look at these examples. Pedir is an E to I verb, so that one pretty well follows the same pattern throughout all 6 conjugations. The E changes to an I. Now when you get to the next 2 examples though, sentir is the one you're used to seeing as an E to IE verb, and you'll notice that the nosotros and vosotros forms only have the E to I stem change. Dormir, which you're used to seeing as an O to UE stem changer, will only change O to U in the nosotros and vosotros forms. As you're taking notes on the stem changing verbs, I would recommend highlighting or maybe color coding these stem changes so that when you look back at your notes, hopefully that will pop out to you and kind of make it easier for you to remember and recognize these patterns. There are 5 irregular verbs in the present subjunctive, and considering what you learned in when you were learning how to do commands, you probably won't be surprised to see which 5 verbs show up in this chart. Your irregular verbs in the present subjunctive are dar, estar, ir, saber, and ser. As we discussed when we were learning the commands, the reason these are considered irregular in the present subjunctive is because you don't technically just take the O off the yo form and add the opposite ending. You can't do that on these verbs because their yo form in the present indicative would be doy, estoy, voy, say, and soy. So that's why these are considered irregular, but they do still follow a similar pattern when it comes to the endings that they use in the subjunctive tense. Next, we're going to discuss some of the general ways that the subjunctive is used to give you a better perspective of when or how or why you might need to know how to use this mood called the subjunctive. There's an acronym I like to use called WEIRDO, and this helps me remember the different instances in which I might need to use the subjunctive. The W stands for willing or wishing something to happen or someone to do something. The E stands for emotions. The I stands for impersonal expressions. The R stands for recommendations. The D stands for doubt or denial. And the O stands for the Spanish phrase ojalá, which means I hope that, and then you would continue the phrase saying what it is that you hope is going to happen. Today we're only going to focus on one of these components, and that's the impersonal expressions. We'll learn a little bit more about the other components eventually, and we'll practice using the subjunctive in different examples and different instances. But to get you started and to just kind of get you into get you kind of used to practicing and using the present tense subjunctive conjugations, I wanted to narrow it down. So we're only going to focus on some impersonal expressions. These are some of the expressions that we'll be using, so make sure you write these down in your notes. Es bueno que, es malo que, es mejor que, es importante que, es necesario que, es urgente que. Oops, sorry, that was the last one. Okay, so those phrases mean, as it says in parentheses, it's good that, so you would continue the phrase like, it's good that the kids are doing so well in school. Or you might use es mejor que, oh, it's better that you stay in tonight because the weather's bad. Or es importante que, it's important that everyone does their homework so that they can pass their test. These are kind of some of those examples. So basically this kind of goes hand in hand with the willing or wishing. Like, well, I would like to see something happen this way for this reason. Let's look at some examples. When you are using the subjunctive, you're going to use two separate clauses. You're going to use a main clause and a subordinate clause. Now, you may or may not have learned about these in your English class, but basically what you'll need to know is that in the main clause, you're going to have a verb or an expression, and it's going to typically be in the, well, when we're using the present subjunctive, these are going to be in the present tense. And that verb or expression will kind of indicate to you or be a clue that you'll need to use the subjunctive in your second clause, which is the subordinate clause. We'll use the conjunction que, Q-U-E, which usually means that, to connect the two clauses. Take a look at this example. Es muy importante que vayas al hotel ahora mismo. It's very important that you go to the hotel right now. So in the first clause, the main clause, you'll notice our verb es is the verb ser conjugated in the present tense. In the subordinate clause, however, vayas is conjugated in the present subjunctive. Here's a couple more examples. Es bueno que los estudiantes estudien. It's good that the students study. Es mejor que los niños jueguen afuera. It's better that the children play outside. So you might be saying this if maybe your house is a mess or the kids are making a mess and you want them to do that outside instead. Es necesario que yo asista a la reunión. It's necessary that I attend the reunion or I attend the meeting. You'll notice in each of these examples, your main clause is conjugated in the present indicative form, which is what you're familiar with and you're used to. The subordinate clause is conjugated in the present subjunctive form. So that's why you see the opposite ending on all of these verbs, which makes them look a little bit strange. But once you get used to using it, they won't look so strange anymore. You'll just know, oh, okay, so this is in the subjunctive. This is more like a hypothetical situation or what someone is wishing or willing to happen. We're going to stop there for today, but keep in mind there is a lot more to the subjunctive mood than just these few examples that we've covered. We're going to take it slow, one step at a time, and we will do lots and lots of practice and examples in class. So if you're feeling overwhelmed or confused right now, just take a deep breath and know that we will get through it eventually and we will take our time. So hopefully as we practice it more, you guys will become more and more comfortable with this concept.